Welcome to the Pulsating Biology, where we have covered the topic of circulatory system or the transport in human beings. Now we are going to discuss the entire chapter in one video that was called as a crash course. This is the crash course video for the chapter Transport in Humans for O-Levels Biology. We're going to begin the revision, firstly understanding how the transport in human basically works. So transport in human basically works in the form of cardiovascular system when you talk about the blood itself. So what kind of the circulation does human beings have? They have the double circulation. That means that the blood is passed through the heart twice, first from the right atrium to the left atrium, then to the lungs, and it comes back to the left atrium and then to the left ventricle, from which is supplied to the entire body. For that we are going to talk about it in a much more detail, but first let's understand what does the basics of transport tells us. So double circulation can be of two types. Either they can be pulmonary or they can be systematic. Since I've already mentioned that since the blood passes through the heart twice, that means first the pulmonary, that means pulmonary, any term that includes a pulmonary, that means that it is related to the lungs. Therefore, whenever from the right atrium the blood is passed into the lungs to get oxygenated, and then from the lung when it comes back to the left atrium, we say that this form of circulation that includes the lung itself is termed as the pulmonary circulation, whereas when you talk about the circulation that includes the transport towards the body, that is termed as the systematic circulation. All right, let's discuss or let's read what are the pointers that are written. That means twice the heart. The double circulation means that the blood is passed in a double manner or twice in the form from the heart. That means from the body it is basically transported to the heart to be oxygenated. The heart transfers it to the lungs. Once it gets oxygenated, the oxygenated blood is transferred towards the heart again, which where from the left ventricle it is basically transferred to the body. This is the entire double circulation that includes in the human body heart. Now let's talk about the double circulation. When you talk about the double circulation, firstly you need to understand that the heart is divided into four chambers. The upper two chambers are termed as the right atrium and left atrium, and then we have the right ventricle. There are the lower two chambers and the left ventricle. How does the circulation occurs within the heart? So basically the deoxygenated that is present in the body that comes into the right atrium, that is the right upper chamber of the heart. From the right atrium, whenever the right atrium contracts, the blood is transferred into the right ventricle. From the right ventricle, the deoxygenated blood is transferred to the lungs. Whenever in any type of the circulation the lungs are included, we term it as the pulmonary circulation, where the deoxygenated blood becomes deoxygenated. Once the blood is oxygenated, it is transferred towards the left atrium, that is the other left chamber of the heart. From the left atrium, whenever the left atrium contracts, the blood is transported into the left ventricle, and from the left ventricle it is transferred to the entire body. Now, the other pointer that you need to learn is that why we say that the left ventricle has the most thicker wall than all of the other chamber. It is because it have to transfer the blood to the entire body that requires a lot of energy. Therefore, we say that they have the thickest kind of the wall and highest blood pressure within the blood vessels. These are the four chambers. These four chambers are divided from one another through a wall that is termed as the septum. When you talk about the circulation or the double circulation, how the from the body, the heart or the blood is transferred twice in the manner, we say that from the body, the blood comes into the heart where it is transferred to the lungs to be oxygenated. So deoxygenated blood is transferred to the lungs where it gets oxygenated, and that oxygenated blood is transferred back to the heart where it is pumped to the entire body. This is the entire working of the double circulatory system. When you talk about the types of the circulation, we have two types of the circulation: the pulmonary circulation and the systematic circulation. In the pulmonary circulation, the lungs are included. Pulmonary, the word pulmonary itself tells it about the lungs. Whenever the lungs are included in any kind of the circulation, we term it as the pulmonary circulation. And whenever you talk about the body involvement, we say that the body involvement along with the circulation, we term it as the systematic circulation. The pulmonary circulation and the systematic circulation combines together, thus we term it as the double circulation. This itself is known as the double circulation. This is the entire working of how the circulation takes place within the human heart. Let's talk about the diagram that we have already discussed in the earlier videos. This is the human heart, and the mentioned over here that the circle one, let me change the pointer. The circle one indicates that this is the right atrium. Below the right atrium, always we have the right ventricle. This is termed as the left atrium, and below the left atrium, always we have the left ventricle. The wall between that divides these chambers are known as the septum. This is the septum wall. Alright. Other than that, you need to understand that there are two kinds of the important veins that enters into the heart. That is the inferior vena cava and the superior vena cava that enters into the right atrium. Once the blood enters into the right atrium, it is transferred to the right ventricle where it is sent towards the lung to get the oxygenated. Once it is sent towards the lung through the pulmonary vessel, it comes back towards the heart into the right atrium. Then it is supplied to the left atrium and the left ventricle, and then it is supplied to the entire body. We have already mentioned over here why that the thicker walls are present in the left ventricle, because it has to supply the body towards the entire body. Alright, this is the entire visually understanding of a human heart. The next topic we have is about the cardiac cycle. Cardiac cycle is a cycle. The term cardiac, as we already learned, the term pulmonary that refers towards the lungs, the word term cardiac refers towards the heart. So the term cardiac cycle means that the cycles or the kinds of the rhythms that are taking place in the heart. That's why we term as at the sequence of events. So one heartbeat means when the blood is entered into the right atrium, right ventricle towards the lungs, and then comes back to the left atrium, then the left ventricle, and then to the entire body. This entire process at once is termed as the one heartbeat. So in order to understand one heartbeat, we need to understand the contraction and the relaxation. We need to understand whenever the right atrium contracts, then it pumps the blood towards the left ventricle. When the right atrium contracts, the left ventricle relaxes. When the right ventricle contracts, the right atrium relaxes. So what occurs is that firstly, the right atrium contracts and pumps the blood into the right ventricle. Once the right ventricle contracted, it is pumped the blood into the lungs. When after being oxygenated, the blood is transferred towards the left atrium. When it contracts, the left ventricle stays relaxes. So whenever the left ventricle contracts, the blood is transported into the left ventricle, and here whenever it contracts, and it basically supplies to the entire body. So whenever the atria contract and the ventricular contract, the sound that is made is termed as the lub. Alright, whenever the ventricles relax, the sound that is made as a lub. So this lub and dub sounds makes up the one heartbeat sound. One heartbeat sound, that is known as the one entire cardiac cycle. Now let's talk about the circulatory system in much more detail. Whenever we talk about the circulatory system, you need to understand that what kind of components are included into the circulatory system. So basically 3 main components are included. That is the artery, that are the veins, and then are the capillaries. These plays a very important role. Whenever you talk about the arteries, you need to understand that these are the vessels that takes the blood away from the heart, and the veins takes the blood towards the heart, and capillaries are basically between both of them, that basically helps in the interexchangement. So have a look at this diagram, which tells us that the arteries, whenever they bifurcate and become singular, that is termed as the arterioles. Similarly, whenever the veins bifurcates and they are singular, that is termed as the venules. And between the arteries and the venules, the interexchangement occurs between the capillaries. Now let's talk about how the blood is divided between the arteries, veins, and the arterioles, venules, and the capillaries. The 30% of the blood is basically in the arteries, the 5% is in the capillaries, and 65% of the blood is in the veins. Since the veins are running throughout in our body, that's why we term as the most amount of the percentage is present in the veins. This is the the overview of how the systematic circulatory system works with the components of artery, veins, and the capillaries. Once we have understood those components, let's talk about the differences between those components, such as the arteries and the veins. For the very basic, that the arteries arise from the aorta, and aorta arise from the left ventricle. Therefore, we say this, since the left ventricles have thicker walls, therefore they have a higher blood pressure. We say that the arteries that arise from the left ventricle indirectly have higher blood pressure and have thicker walls as compared to the veins. So we say that the arteries have thicker walls, whereas the veins have the thinner walls. Other than that, artery carries the oxygenated blood. The oxygenated blood is carried by the arteries. As we have told all earlier, that the arteries carry the blood away from the heart. Therefore, whenever the blood is oxygenated, it is carried away from the heart towards the body. And the veins that carry the blood towards the heart, we say that they carry the deoxygenated blood. They definitely carry the heart, the deoxygenated blood towards the heart to be oxygenated. The other component that we're going to talk about the arteries is the veil. The presence of veins, where valves are not present in the arteries, whereas veins consist of the valves. What is the function of the valve? Basically, valve function as controlling the backflow of the blood. These are very important when we talk about the component flow of the blood, controlling the backflow of the blood. Other than that, one exception that is present between the arteries and the vein is regardless of the pulmonary artery and the pulmonary vein. We always have talked about the arteries carry the oxygenated blood, but as an exception, we say that the pulmonary artery carries the deoxygenated blood. Similarly, we call it that the veins carry deoxygenated blood, but whenever you talk about the pulmonary artery, it carries the oxygenated blood. That's all about this chapter. We have already talked about this chapter in a much more detail in the previous video. This was the overview. If you have any questions, you can ask in the comment section below. Thank you for watching.